Okay, folks, this week we have week 8 of distance learning. We are starting our final project for the class. Originally, this class was going to have an exam as your final, but of course, because things have changed or circumstances have changed, it doesn't really make sense for us to do a test. So rather than do the exam, you'll be doing a final project. It is a 2-part project, which means you'll do 1 part this week and the second part next week. You do have access to the entire project now, so you can see the whole thing, and if you do have time or feel like it or know you'll be really busy next week, you can get started on all of those pieces now, or you can wait and do it in 2 parts like like the assignment says. It'll really be up to you guys. I will go through it today so you guys can see what it is that you are expected to do, and then you guys can make the decision for yourself moving forward, okay? So you're always going to be in Google Classroom under classwork, and then this week, it's week 8. You'll notice the dates there are correct to the dates that we're currently in. So always start with your assignment log. Always start by looking at what is due and in which order I suggest you do it in. So I suggest you start with the atomic structure final project information because that is your only new assignment this week. We do weekly reflections every week, so that's not anything new for you folks. But the atomic structure and that periodic table element project is your project. It's the work for this week, okay? Because it's a 2-part week, this is all I'm assigning you now. Only part 1 is due at the end of this week, so you can spend as much time as you need working on week 1 working on part 1 until Friday. It is quite a bit of research, which is why I'm giving you so much time. When you actually open the element project, it is technically called the Atomic Structure and the Periodic Table Adopt an Element Final Project, okay? This is the overview. When you first open the assignment, it'll give you all the information you need on what is due, when it's due, how many points it's worth, what different points need to be in your research, and it actually has the research template at the bottom. So I'll go through all of that in just a second. Notice it does have a part 1 and a part 2. This is what I'm referring to as one's going to be done this week and one will be done next week. We are specifically going to be in part 1 this week. So notice the due date 5/22/20. You'll be doing all of your research this week for the actual presentation summary you'll be creating next week. So you'll be looking at one specific element, which I will show you where that assigned element is for you. And you'll be looking at things like their physical properties, chemical properties, things about its atomic structure, stuff about its symbol and where it's found on the periodic table, history of it, when it was created, when it was discovered, the ways that we use it. Those are all important things and topics that we've talked about in the past. Things like melting points, boiling points, density, flammability, reactivity, atomic numbers. These are all vocab words that should be coming back to the front of your mind and things that I want us to revisit before the semester ends, okay? All of your research will be answered on the page below, so I'll show you guys that template in just a second. And you want to keep track of your sources as you go because you'll need those citations for your presentation, okay? Part 2 is the actual digital report or the Google Slides presentation you'll be creating later, so I'll talk about that at the end. Down here you have some suggested resources, some things that I think will be helpful to you as you're working. This very first one, the dynamic periodic table with tabs, I think will be your best resource. If you open that tab or if you open that website, it is going to give you some options, things like Wikipedia, which is information, properties, orbitals, isotopes. This is going to be really helpful. You've come in here and click on the assigned element that you have. It's going to tell you things like what family is it in, what's its state at room temperature. Let's say we make it, 0 degrees Celsius. What's its temperature in that state? So you're going to go through and figure that out. Things like melting point, boiling point, electronegativity. This is all information that you will need to research about your project, and I think that's a really good resource for it. So if you come down here, you'll see that it's got the certificate or the research. This is the page that's due. This Google document is due on the 22nd. So when you come in here, you're going to fill out the atomic mass. These are all physical properties. These are all chemical properties. You're going to tell me some things about the element, some history and discovery, some applications and uses, so fun facts. So notice I've already given you the questions that you need to answer. You're just filling those questions out for your project, and this is specifically to find the information before you start putting together your presentation, okay? Down here is where you'll put all the sources or all the links that you used. I want the title and the link from where that source came from. So make sure you're keeping track of what websites you use to find this information as you collect your research, okay? If you're curious about where your specific element assignment is, you're going to open up in Google Classroom the Period 1 element assignments for final project. You are going to see that each of your student IDs are here. Find your student ID, the one that obviously is associated with you, and that will be the atomic number. So student 68985 is responsible for completing element 4. If you go back to your periodic table, that means that that person is going to be doing beryllium as their element for the project. Okay, so please make sure that you are taking a look at this. Make sure that you are using as much information as you can because that research does need to be filled out. Okay. After you have done your research next week, you'll be responsible for part 2. I'll do some more explanation of part 2 next week, obviously, but know that it is a Google Slides presentation. You were doing this by yourself. You do not have help, which is why this will be the only thing due for you next week. And remember, next week, I believe it's next week. Yeah, next week, technically Monday is a holiday. So really, if you observe the holiday on the 25th, you're going to have 4 days to complete that presentation, which is just 4 slides. So it should be a good balance for you guys that week. You need to make sure that when you're completing part 2, you have finished and turned in all of part 1 because part 1 is due 5/22, which is this Friday. Okay. Then at the end of the week, you still have your weekly reflection. This is a good place to ask questions, give insight, do whatever. But don't forget that as you're working, you're always welcome to send me emails. I can set up Zoom calls if we need some clarification. I will answer as many questions as I can. You just have to ask those questions in order for me to know you need the help. Okay. So this week, you are focused on part 1 of your project, your final project. It is going to be due on Friday, and that is just this Google Doc portion, just the actual research for your element. Okay? If there are any questions, please make sure you ask. I'm happy to answer them. Otherwise, I will talk to you guys next week on Monday. Excuse me, Tuesday. Monday's a holiday. Enjoy.